are producing waste at an alarming rate, and humans can't really afford to do so because we will be left with very few resources in the future. Hello and welcome, I'm Sadhika Tiwari and you're watching Eco India. We need to look at waste as a resource, and we need to figure out ways to extend the life of the things that we use on an everyday basis. And there are many possibilities and opportunities here, starting from the water that we use to brush our teeth in the morning and the shirt on your back. Let's start with water. Delhi, during the peak of its heat wave in June, faced a water crisis. The city fell short of 50 million gallons of water a day than what was required. And Delhi isn't the only city that has been trying to figure out ways to treat its wastewater and expand that capacity. However, that is not enough. So let's take a look at some of the challenges and solutions that might offer a way forward.
60% of the large centralized treatment plants in India's cities are not properly functional. They're old, poorly maintained, and often there is a shortage of trained staff. Yet, the potential of wastewater treatment is huge.
Even if we are able to recycle and reuse 30-40% of water, it means that much more water available for domestic use, the critical sector, which is important for health and hygiene.
With the help of sensors and data streams, a number of startups are aiming to tap the potential of wastewater treatment. For women in the Sangam Vihar area, accessing clean water is a daily struggle. With over 1 million inhabitants, it's Asia's largest unauthorized colony. Located only 20 kilometers from the Indian Parliament, the area lies partly beyond the city's water supply network. The state borewells are operational only once a month. The groundwater level is simply too low. The only option for residents is to get water from tankers. That's expensive and often not enough. The situation is desperate.
Borewell water can't be used for cooking. It has high level of salts. The water is so dirty that our water filters get clogged up.
Water is scarce throughout Delhi. The Indian capital can only meet around 75% of its water needs. And moreover, water is distributed unfairly. In some areas, there is more than enough. In others, there is almost nothing. Up to 30% of clean water is lost through leaks or is spilled and wasted.
There's no reason why Delhi cannot meet its water supply and provide water to everyone with its current supply levels.
One way to do that is with improved wastewater treatment. Less than half of Delhi's wastewater is recycled, and only 18% of the water treated actually gets used. The pipes of the 35 centralized treatment plants are dilapidated, and a lot of water goes to waste. Treating the wastewater where it is produced on site could be a solution. In some Indian estates, decentralized systems are mandatory in residential and commercial complexes. In Gurugram, a tech hub on the outskirts of Delhi, this approach failed, with 80% of the decentralized systems non-functional. One reason is poor maintenance. The wastewater treatment plant in this residential complex processes 130,000 liters of wastewater. Previously, it was monitored by staff on site, but now monitoring is largely digital. That's done by Delhi-based company Digital Pani. The company uses what's called a plug-and-play model, which integrates machines on-site with modern digital monitoring.
We are not trying to aim for fully automated, 100% digitized assets because the cost and the benefit has to also play out for the customers. So we are always proposing a hybrid sort of operation where you're blending in technology where it's useful.
Rahul Singh, the company's technical expert, explains the benefits of sensor-based monitoring.
The system used to be a kind of black box. You had to go and investigate if something went wrong. Now we have installed monitoring sensors. And when the system is cleaned, we notify the operator. We also check the amount of water. If water is lost, we can find out where.
The company claims that the system now purifies 20% more water than before, that the water quality is better and energy consumption has dropped significantly. The treated water is suitable for flushing toilets and watering gardens. There is no need for locals to buy extra water. Back in Sangam Vihar, the unauthorized settlement where residents have to buy expensive water. There is just 45 liters of water available per person per day here, but with 1 million inhabitants, a vast amount of wastewater is generated. Here too, decentralized water treatment could significantly improve the situation. According to a recent study, only half of the settlement's wastewater should be treated in Delhi's centralized plants.
The other half of Sangam Vihar, which is very dense, its sewerage system and stormwater should be connected to decentralized points outside Sangam Vihar in the forest area. And it will be an ideal flow.
The treated wastewater could recharge the small lakes and water reservoirs located around Sangam Vihar.
So recycling of wastewater treatment has immense role to play. Considering in a climate-constrained society now, where rainfall is more extreme, groundwater recharge is not very high.
According to a recent study, 80% of wastewater in India could be treated and reused, for example, for irrigation in the agricultural sector. This would leave much more clean water for drinking.
As we saw in this report, it is important to decentralize wastewater treatment. And since we are talking about this, let's head to Germany, a country that treats 96% of its wastewater. We met an engineer in Berlin who has found a way to recycle water within homes, which means that the clean water that we're using in our wash basins to wash our hands can be recycled within the internal plumbing of the house and then used further for other purposes.
What's wrong with this everyday scenario here in Germany? Perfectly good water used for washing and flushing the toilet. A needless waste, an engineer from Berlin tells us.
Drinking water is our most important foodstuff, and food doesn't belong in the toilet.
Seeing potential to optimise Germany's water consumption, Erwin Nolde developed a wastewater treatment facility for residential buildings, in this case a student dormitory.
In this case, we only recycle the grey water from the showers and the water from the sinks. And here in this building, that's enough.
In diesem Objekt reicht es völlig aus.
The first step is to collect the water separately from the showers and sinks and then clean it in these tanks in a series of stages without the use of chemicals. Instead, the job is done by little foam cubes containing microorganisms that devour the unwelcome bacteria. And finally, ultraviolet light is applied to kill off any remaining pathogens. This dormitory in Berlin has had one of Nolde's water recyclers up and running since January 2023. Oishik Dasgupta is a graduate research assistant who moved into this two-room apartment soon afterwards.
I see water as an essential resource for us to live, and I know that so many parts of not just the world, but even in Germany, where I come from in India, we are expected to double the requirement of water by 2030, and we're not going to have enough water.
Most of the students living in the dormitory aren't even aware of the recycling setup, including Maria from Ukraine. Despite the high-tech facility, her rent is €400 a month, far lower than the typical rates in Berlin dormitories. The rents are always high in Berlin, so this was a really nice surprise for me. Recycling water pays off in the long term, especially with new buildings, and not least thanks to Erwin Nolde constantly improving his innovation. He began recycling grey water over 25 years ago, and has since moved up to incorporating heat recovery too. That means using the thermal energy from warm water for sinks and showers to heat up the fresh water from the mains.
This
recycling unit helps us to save 30 to 60% of the drinking water and wastewater. It has zero hygienic risk and no loss of convenience, and we were able to prove that it saved not only water, but energy too, and that the entire system is more environmentally friendly than the usual setup.
The two dormitories were built by the Municipal Housing Association, making them the first in the Berlin-Brandenburg region to recycle grey water. That involved investing more money, €20 more per square metre. But that's an investment that's evidently worthwhile, with plans for further construction projects of this nature.
It delivers exactly what it's supposed to, has an economic amortization of 12 years, and saves drinking water, CO2, and energy by feeding it back into the system. So it's actually a good package all around and is an excellent option for residential buildings.
The system also works in countries suffering from water shortages and poor power supply. It needs a very small energy input, 1.5 kilowatt hours per cubic metre of water, the same amount as a bicycle light.
Decentralized water recycling is definitely recommended in places with no properly working wastewater system. If the power supply is poor, then we need solar panels on the roof. And the system could also work at night and would just need a small battery. 1.5 kilowatt hours per cubic meter isn't a lot and relatively easy to handle.
The engineer is proud of his recycled water's quality. Microbial tests have shown that it almost matches that of drinking water, making it suitable for irrigating parks and gardens, for example, and actually far too good for flushing toilets.
How can we discuss waste and not bring up plastic straws? Even within plastic, single-use plastic straws are a big menace, and we all know it. And now these paper straws are emerging as a solution. But honestly, I'm not the biggest fan. Nobody likes their straw turning into a soggy clump halfway through their drink. So here's an even better solution.
These straws are made from dry coconut leaves. They are alternatives to single-use plastic straws and are 100% biodegradable and chemical-free.
I picked up a few of those leaflets, took it to my apartment, and then I started steaming it. And then I saw that it has its own natural wax. The natural wax of the leaf itself makes it antifungal and hydrophobic. And that's how I started. I thought, why not make straws out of it?
Saji Verghese and his team are aiming to convert this agricultural waste to wealth and eliminate the use of plastic straws.
Plastic causes a lot of problem to cows, goats, people and so on, as it is not biodegradable. It damages our environment, and that is why we were given the training to make these eco straws and doing it.
India produces a large share of the world's coconuts, but in the process, dry coconut leaves mostly go to waste.
So that's another value that we are adding to the entire supply chain. You know, that till now which was considered as a waste, we are now adding value to it, which is increasing the farmer's income. At the same time, it's a raw material for a different line of production as well.
The team have adopted a so-called hub-and-spoke model to produce the straws. Spokes are leaf collection centers and hubs are production centers. At the spokes, leaves collected from farms are washed and cut to the required size. Then they are sent to the production unit where they are machine rolled, giving the first layer of each straw the necessary strength and structure.
And after that comes the long rolling, where two longitudinal strips are stuck opposite to each other. And so that we do with the FDA approved water-based glue. So this completes the straw process.
The final straws are sent to the post-processing unit to be sterilized and packaged. Each straw is priced between 1.2 and 2.5 rupees, or around 2 euro cents depending on the size. These straws can stay in beverages for 3 to 4 hours and have a shelf life of 9 months. Verghese says that these are far better for the environment compared to popular alternatives like paper straws. Above all, the team is proud of the fact that it is women who run the show. There are over 100 female employees for whom rural employment opportunities make a huge difference.
In the beginning, we used to get 2,000 rupees to 2,500 rupees. Now that we are experienced in it and are fast in doing work, we take 4,500 rupees, hoping to get more in the future.
I got married when I was 18. I have never worked anywhere since then. I used to be just at home. As soon as this company opened, I joined. Earlier, I had to ask for anything and everything from my husband, but now it is not the case. I don't ask him for anything. I look after my expenses on my own from the money I have earned, and I'm very happy about it.
The team currently produce 9,000 straws per day across 2 leaf processing centers and 3 straw production centers.
We have inquiries from all the 11 states, coconut growing states of India. So we see a huge possibility to create employment. Our goal is to reach provide employment to 1,000 women in the next 3 years.
With more and more countries restricting plastic use, the company has already been able to win many customers abroad with its sustainable innovation.
Since we are talking about waste today, we thought it fitting to come here. Behind me is decades of legacy waste. And like any other landfill, this mountain of garbage has everything, from biomedical waste to textile waste, and because it's all been sitting here for decades, also a lot of gases. So how can this humongous mountain be conquered and all of this waste processed? Well, here are some answers.
Food scraps, plastic bottles, pizza boxes. Think about how many things you throw away each day. Depending on how and where you live, this might differ a lot. The average Indian tosses out 500 grams of garbage every day. For the average American, it's 2.2 kilos. By the way, the US is the world champion in waste generation per capita. This pile grows along with cities and the rising standard of living. On the planet right now, we're 8 billion people producing 2.1 billion tons of rubbish every year. According to this UN study, 38% ends up where it shouldn't. Some 2.7 billion people lack access to basic waste management services.
So no collection, no treatment, no disposal.
Aditi Ramola is the technical director at the International Solid Waste Association. She's one of the supervisors of this study.
So for the lack of those options, what do people end up doing? They take their waste, they start to burn or dump it or dig a hole and dump their waste there. And so this is leading to a crisis. A dump site is where there is absolutely no environmental control.
When it rains, the water filters through the waste and forms leachate, a potentially toxic cocktail of many heavy chemicals and bacteria, among other things, that soak out of the trash.
It's leaking into the environment either through your waterways, your soils, or your air by open burning. And so all of these are emissions that are ending up in the environment that are harming human health. It's harming the environment. When I talk about human health, essentially, if you have contaminated waste, it's going into our food systems.
Under this mountain of trash where there is no oxygen, something else is happening. Bacteria are breaking down organic waste and producing methane, one of the worst greenhouse gases. In the short term, it's over 80 times more potent at heating the planet than carbon dioxide. Landfill operators use several ways to tackle the problems of dumping trash. To protect the ground from toxic chemicals, they start with a large hole in the ground lined with giant impermeable layers of synthetic material, kinda like a huge empty swimming pool with a big plastic sheet in it. At the bottom, there's a drainage system to remove the leachate that's generated. Sensors can also be placed at the bottom layer to detect any possible leaks. After the leachate is treated, it is turned into reusable water. Nowadays, an engineered landfill can also capture most of the methane emitted by making a kind of trash lasagna that stops most of it from going to the atmosphere. As the garbage is dumped, heavy tractors compact it and then cover it with an impermeable layer. Dump, compact, cover, repeat, over and over again. Then a kind of system of pumps sucks out most of the gases generated, including the methane. The methane captured can be burned through a process called flaring that turns it from a super harmful greenhouse gas into a regular harmful one, CO2. But this is a huge waste. The second option. Methane can generate heat, electricity, or renewable natural gas in power vehicles, for example. This technique promises to reduce methane emissions by 60 to 90%. However, not all solutions in this field need to be so high-tech. The IPCC's recommendation to reduce methane emissions from landfill is much simpler and more straightforward. Reduce the amount of organic waste in them, because the methane emissions from landfills are produced when organic matter decomposes underneath a pile of garbage without oxygen. In countries like India, where around 50% of the garbage is wet waste, avoiding it in landfills can be really effective, and some places are being quite successful in implementing this policy. Take Mysuru, for example. With a population of more than 1 million, it produces between 400 and 500 tons of waste daily. The authorities designed a decentralized system in which trash gets collected, segregated, and composted inside their neighborhoods. Here it is important to remember that composting is primarily an aerobic process with oxygen, where microorganisms break down organic matter. It can release small amounts of methane if it's not properly done, if there isn't enough aeration. That is why quite often you see people turning the compost regularly. In Mysuru, about 50% of all waste is composted. For that, the collector goes from door to door. If residents don't properly separate their trash, they'll be fined. Officials say only 5% of the trash goes to landfill. Their goal is zero waste. The compost produced is sold to local farmers and the horticulture department. Closing dump sites and making landfill better is a challenge and can be a long process, but it can be done. Look at this graphic. It shows regions that still have a huge number of open dump sites. In this case, some experts suggest that moving from dump sites to landfills would already be a step forward. On the top of that, separating at least the organic trash before sending it to the landfill, like in Mysuru, is something we can do on a global level. Of course, reducing waste is the top priority that can also be reached worldwide. But let's face it, right now we're producing more and more trash worldwide. The power of smart waste management is that it can reduce costs in the long run. And the more waste you collect in a controlled way, the less harm it does to the environment, and the less money is needed to clean up this mess.
Utility is great, but can waste be used to create something beautiful? Well, yes, it can. Here in Delhi, there are several parks designed around upcycled waste. And across the world, there are many artists who use waste as their choice of raw material for creating art. We met an artist in Hungary who will never run out of raw material for her art because we generate nearly 2 million tons of textile waste each year, which also happens to be her choice of raw material for creating something special.
Every year, it's an integral part of Hungary's Azora Festival, a rich kaleidoscope of colours comprising lengths of fabric arranged in large-scale patterns. And what's more, they're all sourced from used materials, mostly discarded clothes. The majestic installations were conjured up by Angela Tez from the city of Pécs, in the southern part of the country. In 1997, she turned her love of spinning, knotting and weaving into a business concept. And 2 years later, she started recruiting staff for her company, Ray Textile. Many of her employees are people with physical or mental disabilities. For them, it's a welcome opportunity to join the workforce.
I rework materials and use them to make carpets and other items. That's important because we'd otherwise be drowning in trash. You could say we're recycling the fabrics.
Europeans throw away 11 kilos of clothes per head every year, with just 1% being recycled. These days, the majority of people's clothes are not made of cotton or other natural materials. Clothing is hazardous waste. Most clothing items are made of synthetic materials that nature cannot take back. The fabrics processed by Ray Textile are donated by local residents, plus a second-hand store in the area hands over items it can't sell. Interested parties can place orders for the new items via an online shop. They often come with information on the proportion of used fabrics and the amount of manual labour involved. It's about quality and respect. Every year, Ray Textile processes several thousand kilos of used fabrics. Materials that would typically end up in a landfill are given a new lease on life here.
So much can be reused, recycled, upcycled, and basically prevented from turning into waste. Are there any such things you do to prevent waste generation or reduce it in your homes or in your offices? Do let us know. You can email us or reach out to me directly on my social media handles. I will see you next week. Until then, take care. Goodbye. Namaskar.